This is Collected Clan, Episode 3.
And I said, okay, I can take one more step. And I would take one more step. And an hour would go by. I seriously couldn't feel my legs after an hour.
Welcome to Collected Clan, the podcast about outstanding people I've met along the way. People with interesting stories, triumphs, ideals. People who've made their mark in the world and in my life. I'm your host, Gregory Byerline. I've met a lot of people over the years, and many people come and go. Shakespeare wrote, "All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances." But these people are the company that you keep. Everyday people, just like you and me. Well, Markus, thanks for sitting down for a little bit tonight. For our listeners out there, let's put some context to how you and I know each other. Trying to remember the first time I came into the BNI meeting. I want to say it was like 2006.
I believe I started with them. I'm thinking about it now. It had to be in 2006 as well.
Okay.
I do remember that I was there before you, but it had to be roughly, I would say it wasn't too long, before you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it was 06 or 07. So we're going back 11, 12 years of history with a gap in there, but still, still a lot of life that we've lived together, even though some of that has been through Facebook because someone decided to move back out west.
That's true.
So you and I met in a Nashville chapter of BNI, which is Business Network International. I had a great time with that organization, and you and a handful of other people from that chapter when we were there, I'm still in contact with. As a networking thing, I thought it was great to meet people for business, but there's more to life than business, and I've really appreciated retaining some people for non-business. So since you have moved back out west, are you still doing BNI out there?
When I got out here, one of my first things, because just being in the BNI chapter in Tennessee, I was in it for quite a few years and just trying to get my feet on the ground because I just got out of the military and wanted to get to know some business owners and some people that were trying to make things happen in Middle Tennessee. And so that's why I joined. And so for those same reasons, I did join when I moved back to California, trying to get reconnected. And it helped me get reconnected. I'm not a member anymore, but helped me get reconnected with some people that I did know and helped me get connected with some people that I actually do work with still and some friends that came out of that. So I think that's the biggest part of anything, whether it's any kind of networking organization, especially like a BNI, while people do focus on business, I think the long-term relationships are really probably the most valuable part of everything, and that doesn't happen in the group. It happens because of what you choose to do after.
Right. I mean, even beyond the one-to-one format, you can get together for personal reasons, not just because of business and check-the-box reasons. So I remember during one of the chapters when you were one of the two speakers for that time, we had like 10, 12 minutes. I forget. It's been a long time. I've had 3 kids since then, so there's a lot of brain cells that are gone. You had told a little bit of story about your military background and how that played into your Advocare business. And I'd known a little bit about Advocare. I'd love to hear how all of that ties in together with you.
First of all, and I'm going to talk about how that ties in. And just going back on how you said those one-on-ones, just to get you a little insight into kind of how I am, is you have some structure there on, hey, this is what you talk about. This is how you talk about the one-on-ones. I never follow that.
Oh, I didn't either.
I'm more of the kind of person that's going to be saying, I don't need a piece of paper to show me how to get to know somebody, figure out what makes them tick, and trying to, see if there's some future there that we could help each other or something like that. So it's kind of ironic in a way. I'm very unstructured, although I did come from an extremely structured background because I like to have it more, things happen more organically. Yeah. I think that's the kind of person you are too. So.
Yeah. I remember seeing that agenda and I'm like, that's funny. I'm an artist. Yeah. I'll kind of do what I want to do. Thank you very much.
Talking a little bit about just how the military plays a little bit into my transition into Advocare as a business, right? I think, if you can go back to the beginning of my military service, when I went to United States Military Academy at West Point. I was recruited to play some Army football. I was a running back for the team, and I was there from '96 and graduated in 2000. Just that part of my military service, West Point itself, you're living and breathing what the military is 24/7.
Yeah.
I actually think that exposure in the military is more so than some people that just enlist immediately in the military out of high school because they get to go home. Whereas, as a cadet at West Point, you don't get to go home. It's with you 24/7. You're waking up as a plebe, which they call the freshmen. They call them plebes. You're waking up anywhere on a lot of days around 4 to 4:30 to deliver papers back then in the 90s to upperclassmen. So that was a shock on the system itself. If you compare that to most times that people who go to high school wake up, you could cut
at 10 on Saturday morning.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So there's none of that anymore. So it's a shock to the system. A lot of discipline. We weren't allowed to talk outside of our rooms until spring break of our very first year. So you're there for probably 9 to 10 months. Without even able to speak. You're not even able to speak outside of your barracks room, not in the hallway. Whoa. You're allowed to speak in the academic buildings. So when you're in class, you can speak. But, there was an extreme formal structure in place, and it was really well enforced because there's only, one class of freshmen or plebes and 3 classes of upperclassmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, and yucks, cows, firsties is what they call those. And if anybody sees you talking outside of your room, then you're going to have to get harassed by, 3 times as many upperclassmen as there are you. So it's really simple to, make your life harder. And probably the biggest thing that we had that I would say that we struggled with daily was sleep.
Or lack
the other one was time, which sleep also played a part because, you had to determine how much sleep am I going to get tonight versus how much time do I need to just make sure I pass my classes as I'm playing football and going through the whole program right there, which was very challenging. So for me, I immediately found myself in a position in the military where time was extremely valuable, and that never left. And if you could just fast forward into my exit from the military and even doing Advocare part-time when I was in the military because of the extra money it provided me, what I did realize, and I saw at least in the Advocare lifestyle, was people had time. People had both money and time, and I had not seen that when I grew up. If I could go back to where I was born in South Texas in a place called Cameron County, Harlingen, Texas. And I think it was the poorest county in America, if not one of the poorest counties in America that I grew up in. And we lived there for a couple of years. But I just remember we had dirt floors when I was a kid. My parents were both picking cotton in the cotton fields. Both parents decided, hey, we got to have a better life than this. Let's go somewhere. And we would be moving, from time and time again. And one day my mom said, enough's enough. She was sewing buttons in a jean factory in South Texas. She just realized I am not meant to do this. And so she said, and she was looking for some other job. I remember she said she went for a secretary position, and the guy asked her, said, Cindy, can you make coffee? And she goes, no, but I can learn. And she didn't get the job because she wasn't qualified to be a secretary.
Wow.
Or an assistant at a business. And so she said, I'm going to go back to vet school. I'm going to get my degree and I'm going to go into vet school. And at that time, I don't think there was a whole lot of veterinary schools available. One of them happened to be Texas A&M. And so when I was a kid was when my mom's college journey began. So the relationship between my mom and dad, it wasn't good all the time. There's a lot of stress, a lot of debt. We weren't by any means even making it. I don't know how it happened that we did make it. But my mom would have night jobs, working from maybe 8 to 12 o'clock at night, trying to make ends meet, and then trying to put college on top of that, going through to just pure credit card and then financing. And finally was able to actually make it work somehow, raising 2 kids. And I have 1 kid now, so I have so much more respect for her. After that, I realize how much work that takes, and I just can't imagine raising 2 kids because my dad didn't do a whole lot of raising the first few years. He was there for a lot of my sports years and some of my formidable, years where he was able to make a good impression, and there's some good things he brought to the table, but he wasn't really around the first few years. And as far as raising, so a lot of the care was provided really mainly by my mom and maybe some people that were helping her within the family. And I ended up seeing my mom go to college, seeing her get her degree, seeing her get into vet school, and then seeing her graduate. And everybody was so impressed with that. But I'm just thinking that's what you do in life. You just move forward. You don't care what the obstacles are. When you make a decision, you want to accomplish something, you go do it. And so that's what my mom did. And she, now today, fast forward, owns a very successful animal hospital over in Huntington Beach, California. I know the numbers because I'm helping her out a little bit because we're going to expand it now into a second hospital.
That's excellent.
And make it into a corporate expansion for her. So, I mean, as far as success, she is a success story where there wasn't any success. And so that was an example that I was able to take and see. But with that came a lot of sacrifice on the time. And when I realized, everybody's like, what do you want to become when you grow up, Marcus? And I never wanted to become a doctor because I realized that, wow, if a doctor's absent more or having, as much difficulty as my mom balancing the time, I don't really know if I want to be that person or have that kind of lifestyle. So I said, I knew I wanted to have time. I wanted to be successful, but somehow I found myself at West Point having no time for myself, in the grind. But I realized that, if I could just smash out 4 years, then it was going to be good. That probably played a huge role in my decision-making process of who I am, because I realized that it's not always about what you want to study, what makes you passionate. It's not about, the things that maybe interest you, because those things are going to be there in a lot of different fields. You can challenge yourself continually if you want to educate yourself in a lot of different fields. You're not going to master, anything worthwhile. It's not going to be easy to master.
Right.
So for me, realizing that it's more about the lifestyle and not the job. And so that's where Advocare came in. I saw people and it's a sales, basically you could say you build a sales team that markets nutritional supplements. I loved health. I loved wellness. I loved supplements. Well, I didn't love supplements yet. Didn't believe in them until I had Advocare stuff given to me by a friend. And all of a sudden I felt better, energetic. I was going through a pre-ranger course in the Army at the time. And all of a sudden I went from one of the worst performers in a pre-ranger course because I was built more like a bowling ball. On the West, Army football team. I'm only 5'8" on a good day, well over 200 pounds as a running back, had gigantic legs and just a big muscles. But you want me to be an endurance athlete like some of these people who try out and become in the special forces, become Rangers. That was not me.
Yeah.
And it was a complete body change for me. And it was difficult. And I was one of the worst in the program for the first month, just in the trying out program. They call it in the officer basic course. It was a pre-ranger course that we were taking 6 months to get a slot. And out of about 40 people, there's only 16 slots available. So you had to be at least in the top. And I was like in the bottom 5. And wow. I remember just so many times I wanted to quit. But Advocare came in perfectly in my life to where it just gave me an edged energy. First of all, was taken care of. I felt great. I didn't realize how much nourishment played in somebody's life. If you're getting up at 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the morning, running 5 to 10 miles a morning, working out like you were in college when you were playing football around 6 o'clock at night, and then trying to recover and studying for your officer basic courses. I didn't realize how much nutrition came into effect until I started using it, and I was a different person coming out. The personality, I joked around with people because they said, wow, your personality's back, Marcus. And it's like, yeah, I just feel good, have more energy. And I think that's for a lot of people. If you have energy, you can do a lot of things that you couldn't do otherwise. So I believed in Advocare. And then I saw people with the lifestyle that I always thought, was ideal. And that was a lifestyle of freedom, lifestyle of not having to report. And I know I came from a very strict background in the military, but the idea that you can enforce self-discipline on yourself, and if you have enough of that, you can create, a marketing empire to where you can have freedom for yourself. That was really attractive to me.
That's cool.
And it wasn't just financial freedom. I did see people at the time that I directly knew and worked with, that were making, when I started, they were around $25,000, $30,000 a month. They were $300,000 to $400,000 in that year. And they got up to, incomes that were touching, $1 million.
Yeah.
And that blew my mind, coming from a second lieutenant salary. So,
which is probably nowhere near that. And maybe even less these days. Yeah,
I think my first second lieutenant paycheck for a month was $1,972 because I remember it.
Wow.
And my first month in Advocare, I actually made a little more than I had as a second lieutenant. So I over doubled my income just in my very first month. And so that was really attractive for me, even though I couldn't really commit a lot of time to it. I could I could do it a little bit, and I believed in the products, and I just shared them. So that was really my story until I moved to Tennessee, because in the middle of that life, I did make it through pre-ranger school. Just to give you an idea about how competitive it was, and this is not to toot my horn, but just to tell you, in a peacetime environment, I don't know the rate today, but they were very hard on us. And I remember we started our class around 280, 295 people, I think. Within the first 3 weeks, we were down to, I believe, it might have been 30 to 40 people.
That's a big drop.
It was something like that. And I'd say it might have been as high as 80, but I know the initial class that graduated from our original, almost 300 was around upper 20s.
Wow.
That attrition rate was, that's what we had to fight through back then. And I joke around with friends who are Rangers, and I say I was a winter Ranger because if you ask somebody, how hard is Ranger school as far as Army schools? And they say, well, Ranger school, yeah, it's pretty hard. It's like a 7, 8. Some people will say, at least back then. And then, and I said, well, how hard is the winter phase? They're like 12, 13 on a scale. Because you got to do the exact same things in basically horrific conditions. So
yeah,
I remember one night just in Ranger school, we lost a 1/3 of my platoon to hypothermia.
Wow.
So they were kicked out. They didn't get permanently sick, but they got hypothermia. They had to take them back in ambulances, and they were kicked out. So, I mean, that was in one night of a freezing rainstorm, to give you an idea. But, overcoming that obstacle also while just incorporating Advocare. So work ethic was never my limitation.
Clearly.
I never looked at something and said, well, how hard is that going to be? I think a lot of people approach challenges in their lives in that way. What's my rate of success? That's what a lot of people say.
Right.
And I just want to hit my head against a wall when I hear that. Well, what's the return if you succeed? Then balance that maybe with, how much effort will it take?
Yeah, what's your input level to gain the output?
That's exactly right. Yeah. And so my whole life was not about, how much output I could give. I knew I had a lot to give, but it was definitely about finding a way and a vision for my life to where I could create an income where I would not be locked down to reporting to a boss, and it would provide freedom for me.
Sure.
And, I always really wanted to be, the parent that I would hope that I would have had. The parenting. My mom was excellent. My dad, like I said, was excellent in some points of our lives, but he was in and out a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the reality of what happened. So I think that was the attractive point in Advocare for me. I saw people with the balance. They had money, time, freedom, influence, leading volunteer armies. You have in the Army, you have positional leadership, and you also have voluntary leadership because people don't have to follow you over a berm. But you do have positional leadership. And I think positional leadership is very useful in a lot of ways as long as you know how to use it for administrative activities. But, rank doesn't really matter when you ask a soldier to go into a berm with you.
Right.
It doesn't matter.
Survival is king, I would imagine.
Yeah. And I realized that. I'm going to get on a little side note here, but one of my very first, not missions, but challenges in Iraq, I was as a person, I require a lot of myself, so I require a lot of other people around me, and it's just how I am. I mean, I don't actually require it, but people kind of either hang out with me and raise their performance level, right, or they're just going to be offended and kind of just walk off.
Yep.
Because they're going to see me keep moving forward, and they just can't stand it if they're not,
right.
So that's kind of, and so as an officer, I just assumed people would follow me, and they just knew what was in my heart. And I remember my first time, we were supposed to have enemy over this sand berm, and we were supposed to go attack them and arrest some people. And I was about to go over it. I was like, let's go. And this is actually with an artillery unit. So I wasn't with a special forces unit. I was with a normal artillery unit, even though I was a ranger. We went over this berm, and I was like, whew, thank goodness. And there's nobody on the other side. And I look back, and I'm the only one. And this thing's probably 15 feet high. So once you're on the other side, there's no walking back up fast at all. And I remember I was all alone on the other side, and thank goodness they weren't there.
Yeah.
So the intel was bad. And I went back, and I just talked to people, and I was like, what in the world? What why didn't you guys go? And I didn't realize that, people were scared. Wow. And I just thought that you would do it. That's what you're trained to do. And going back, one of my platoon sergeants came up and he said, "Sir, you know what? I'm gonna tell you I'm sorry, but I've been talking with the soldiers. Like, we have so much respect for you that you went over that berm. Like, I'll follow you, wherever, because I know you're going to go first." And I think that comes as a part of the leadership is, you got to be willing to go first if you're going to have people follow.
Yeah.
That's leadership. Otherwise it's called manipulation, trying to talk people into doing what you haven't done already.
Right. So when you were at West Point playing football, were you part of that epic, like, Army-Navy football rivalry, that whole shebang?
Yeah, I was. We did all right. We did really good one year, and we had an average record the other years. So we were definitely, I was definitely part of that. And it is surreal. There's a lot of challenges that come with doing that and getting there. But it was surreal, and it was cool having my brother come out, and watch me and stuff like that.
That's really cool.
That was special.
That's really cool.
That was really neat.
So is West? I'm going to ask you a very civilian question here. Is West Point the Ranger Academy?
No.
Okay.
So West Point's basically like a college.
Okay.
Right, a military service, and when you go to school at West Point, you get commissioned as an officer right when you graduate. So upon graduation, you get commissioned as a second lieutenant. And as you get a second lieutenant, now the whole entire Army is where you're a part of.
Okay.
So you're officially a part of the Army upon graduation. Even though you're active service as a West Point cadet, you're still not officially a part of the Army itself. You're a cadet, that's your rank, but you're not a second lieutenant and assigned to a unit.
Gotcha.
So upon graduating from West Point, now you have the option of choosing what branch you want to get into. Aviation, infantry, field artillery, armor, you have air defense artillery, and those are just to name a few of the things you can choose. Plus, you have other non-combat branches you can choose, like service support, JAG, ordnance, so communication. Maybe you could be a translator because you have a second, maybe a second language. Those are things that you can get into upon graduating, but you have to branch yourself. And I branched personally myself in artillery.
Okay.
So once I entered artillery, I was stationed at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. We had the chance to decide if we're going to go ahead and try out for a Ranger qualification. That was when we had some football guys went out with me. We had about 40 guys plus, maybe a little more, try out with us. And it was a 6-month course, so we had to do our normal officer basic course, learning how to be an artillery officer, while we did the pre-Ranger course as well. So the pre-Ranger course would happen mostly in the mornings, waking up, about 2.5 hours earlier than most people that were going through the course itself, and just getting all the physical activity that they would train us in and runs and stuff like that. So once we became the part of the very end of that Ranger course, 40 people tried out for just a pre-Ranger course, and 16 people got slots to actually go into Ranger school after that 6 months was accomplished. So so the officer basic course was around 6 months, and once you completed that, now if you completed the officer basic course and also got a slot to go try out now and go to Ranger school itself, you would do that before you reported to your combat unit. So I was one of the 16 that qualified. I actually did not think I would be there. I was not the most gifted, but I kept on getting better and better and better and better. I remember around month 3 or 4 in the program, I was more like an average person, no longer in the back of the pack. And then around month 6, I was one of the top 3 runners in the pre-Ranger course itself. So it wasn't about where we started, just about where you finish. And a lot of people,
no kidding.
That was the absolute worst. I was a bowling ball, like I said, and I could run half a mile before I started chafing and, getting out of breath. I was a sprinter with a lot of muscle on me. I was not an endurance athlete. But once that happened, out of the 16 guys that went into the actual Ranger course, just so happened that for whatever reason, I was the only one to actually make it out of there. All the other 15 pre-Ranger students that went to the Ranger school failed Ranger school. So I was the only one to make it out of the 40 that tried out initially. And, I attest that to just taking it a day at a time. I attest that to my faith. My faith plays a big part of just me never wanting to quit on that respect, and just taking one day at a time. And, by the grace of God, I was able to make it. It was a struggle for me to make it through, but I was really happy I did. One of the best moments of my life, realizing that I was going to make it through. But I'll give you an idea of the physical toll on my body. I started at around 205 pounds, pure muscle endurance wise, but I was big, but I could still run, I think at the time, 2 miles in less than 11 minutes.
Whoa, dude.
And I could do that pretty confidently.
With all of that muscle mass?
Yeah.
That's impressive.
And I think I cruised on one of my tests, and I remember I got 11:30. And I was like, man, I could have took a minute off that, But I remember that I was really in shape by the end at 205 pounds. And going into Ranger School, though, they don't just challenge you physically, they challenge you mentally. And they say it's no big deal if somebody can be deprived of
oxygen.
So really it's not about like how physically hard is Ranger School. Everybody can go and try their hardest in between the lines, in between the dots at the beginning and end. But if we take your food away, what will happen to you? Then you get to see a lot of people start going crazy. No fuel.
Yeah.
Right. And they take your fuel away, and then they say, we take your sleep away. Now really what happened? And they say, when you make them people do, combat missions, and you take their food and you take their sleep, then see how they can function as people. And you get to see a lot of drama. You get to see a lot of what happens in the inside of people's minds.
Yeah.
And I remember people were walking on road marches and would just drop in the middle because they would fall asleep and their body would shut down.
Yep.
For 10 minutes, and they would be literally asleep. You could kick them, you could slap them, you could punch them. They would never wake up. We didn't do that, but I'm just telling you, they were in a coma for about 10 minutes because their body said there is no more we can go.
I've seen the mortal version of that at trail races. I'm an endurance runner. I'm going to do my first ultra marathon this year, but hearing stories of friends of mine who do like 50 milers and 100 milers and now like the 200 miler is the new big thing for a certain group of crazies. But they'll talk about needing to grab sleep on a 36-hour trail race, but they're not as muscular, nor are they carrying a rucksack and or ammunition and a weapon. I mean, it's crazy.
Insight. Yeah, I'll tell you the packing level because we know the weights, right? So in the summer packing weight, your rucksack is 35, 40 pounds depending. And they still have to carry probably anywhere between 20 pounds of ammunition to 30 pounds plus a 7-pound weapon, or you can sometimes get stuck with the pig back in that day. And that's going to add another 20 plus pounds. And that was the machine gun. So you're lucky when you don't have the radio and you don't have a machine gun.
Yeah.
But that's in the summer packing. I was a winter ranger, and in the winter phase, you have a standard packing list that weighs about 60 pounds. And you add on that, the Kevlar that you have, and that's both phases, of course, and the weapon, you're looking at 10 extra pounds. You add the radio, which I was a field artillery officer, so I carried that just about every time I can remember.
Wow.
If I wasn't having the machine gun, I had the radio. So you add 40 pounds on that, and the packing weight that you see us packing, climbing the hills, mountains, and stuff in Tennessee Valley Divide during the mountain phase was around 140, 145 pounds.
That's unbelievable. That's more than my 3 kids combined.
Our platoon got together, and we were going to make our initial ascent into this really hilly area, mountain terrain, and our whole platoon, we said, hey, look, guys, we got great news. It's so steep that you cannot, we're not going to be able to make it with our rucksacks. And so everybody got to take the rucksack off and put it in the truck and had the truck meet us up there after the ascent was done, and the road march was done basically. And it was actually more of a tactical march, but it was so challenging, it was hard to be purely tactical. A lot of the areas required you digging into the ground, but also required some rope assist. So you had to pull yourself up on a rope.
Yeah.
I remember it started at the very beginning of the morning, probably the first daylight, and it ended probably an hour and a half to 2 hours after daylight.
Just the ascent?
Just the ascent. So it was a good 8 to 10 hour hike up without stopping, except for, if you got attacked from another opposition force. So it was just a pure ascent other than that.
And where is this? What part of the country?
That was in Dahlonega, Georgia. In
Dahlonega, yeah.
So it was really so everybody got to download, and they said, wait a minute, there still has to be one person that carries the radio though. And I was just like, dear God, do not let it be me. Dear God, do not let it be me. And they're like, okay, Ranger Garza, you got the radio. And they said, besides having the radio, now you're going to also have to carry the platoon leader's navigation equipment because they don't have a rucksack to do that with. So my load went from around 140 pounds to around 155.
A grown
And
adult.
everybody else that I was competing with to make on this hike was just themselves with a weapon. And I still had my weapon too.
Wow.
So how did I get picked to be, unlucky? I don't know. But I did remember, on that hike, we lost, I think, 1 or 2 guys because they couldn't make it up. And I somehow made it up with 150 plus pound of extra weight on me. And I just remember 200 yards into that climb, I'm like, I can't make it. I seriously can't make it. And I knew that if anyone helped me, these guys are right in my ear saying, you're going to fail out of here if anyone helps you. And I said, okay, I can take one more step. And I would take one more step. And an hour would go by. I seriously couldn't feel my legs after an hour. And I'm like, there's no way I can make it. And then I took another step and another step. And at the very end, I actually made it. And I don't know how, but we actually had some guys fail because they couldn't make it up with just their body weight and a weapon.
Wow.
But I couldn't believe that. I couldn't believe I could do that. I really thought there's no way because my gift is not ruck marching. I think it was just by sheer determination. But I will tell you this, that my body was never the same. I couldn't control my body except being able to talk for a couple hours. It just was almost pure heat exhaustion in about 35 degree weather. And so dehydrated. I don't know how much I lost in that hike alone, but I remember that I was never physically the same. It was always hard for me to even pick up a rucksack anymore.
I could imagine.
But
actually, no, I can't imagine. Wow, that's insane.
That was my most challenging moment in Ranger School. And then I remember at the very end, I hiked and I just thought, wow, I did it. I'm so happy. I got a demerit, what they call a minor minus, because I missed one of my check-ins as an RTO. I didn't call in when we hit a phase line. And they said, well, it doesn't matter if you couldn't find reception. You should have been able to get to a higher point to get it. But it's just about, really the failures. If you fail out, you're not failing, and you just had to keep that mindset. But everything else is working against you mentally.
Yeah, well, and the intensity of that makes sense if one is training for combat when literally lives are on the line.
And that's the philosophy.
Yeah.
And I would tell you that as I carried that over through, whether it's going over the berm in Iraq, there's some challenges associated with that. Really keeping a positive attitude was my strong suit. When everybody else was getting negative and just couldn't handle it anymore, people getting dehydrated because we did run out of water in Iraq because we outran our supply lines at the initial push. I really look back at the Ranger training, and it really did prepare me for war.
Yeah, I can see that.
And because it wasn't about, let me be comfortable and sleep 4 hours tonight. Even though we're in a completely unsecured area, we don't even know where we're at, and we're in a small convoy because we're stuck with something, with vehicles. And if you want to die, you can do that.
Yeah.
Or you can do a guard shift properly if you want to survive and do 24, 360 security, for however long we're here. And I'm like, that's what we're going to do because you're not going to die on my watch. And I was able to at least return with everybody that I went with.
Well, how long were you over in Iraq?
Initially, we were supposed to be over there for 3 months because our mission was to take over where the 3rd Infantry Division stopped at Baghdad, took over that airport where we were supposed to help be the spearhead for the 4th Infantry Division. We were initially supposed to be there a few months as an artillery unit. So if I could describe the spearhead to you, it was 110 cavalry. And then on the 4th Infantry Division, it was 117 of field artillery, which was us supporting the cavalry, which was mechanized, had tanks and stuff like that. And what it ended up being was a tank and then my Humvee in the very front. And some parts of that I remember. So we were at the tip of the tip because we were staggered to provide, certain people artillery. So
yeah. And what year is this?
This is in, we went over there in March of 2003.
Okay. And the operation name was?
Operation Iraqi Freedom.
Iraqi Freedom. Okay. Yes. Just a small little thing we were involved in. And you're on the tip of the tip.
We were after Baghdad, after the push to Baghdad. So through, Tikrit, which was Saddam's hometown, Baji, Taji, we ended up taking over the eastern Iraq, which is Kirkuk. We made a base camp called KMTB, Kirkuk Military Training Barracks, where we raised the first Iraqi army over there. And that was our final mission, but that didn't happen until after 6 months. But we were initially supposed to be over there 3 months. We made probably 3.5 months of just pure convoying and taking over little towns. And luckily, people didn't want to mess with the artillery, so they weren't really giving us the resistance we had planned on. And we were very organized at the tip, so that was actually a fortunate part of where we were. But the unfortunate part was running out of supplies, food, and water in 125-degree plus heat.
Yeah.
So that was challenging. But after that 3.5 months was over, a lot of our artillery guys went home, other units, and we just found out we were going to stay an extra 6 months over past Christmas, and that really put everybody in a funk mentally. And then we found we were going to stay out another 3 months and another 3 months. So we ended up staying over a year on that deployment.
Slowly advancing, quickly advancing, or staying put?
We stopped advancing after about 4.5, 5 months. So 5 months we stopped advancing. We developed base camps, forward operating bases called FOBs. So I think there was 5 FOBs, 1 operating base camp called KMTB. We basically stood in place, and our goal was to grow the Iraqi army, the very first battalion of it. So the training camp would happen. The new recruits were happening on the base camp. And we would just do various missions the last 6 to 8 months of that. After I was a platoon leader in the first, I think it was probably first 4.5, 5 months, I was taken up to the headquarters over at the main training, the KMTB, or at the main base camp. I ended up being the logistics officer, providing for all the logistics in the East with another captain. His name's Jason Posey. He was another football guy that I played football with, a great guy. We became the 2 captains that would basically deal with the contracts that built up KMTB. So needless to say, because all the Iraqis wanted to deal with us, since we had all the contracts and the authority to build up the area, we didn't get much sleep because people were trying to wake us up at all times of the night to tell us what they could do. We'd have to go to the guard gate and stuff like that. So that was interesting. It was actually kind of fun compared to being in the middle of nowhere, what it ended up being, when we stopped our advancement. So we ended up dealing with I could tell you those guys by name, but about 3 to 5 different contractors, big contractors that help us build up the actual base camps in the eastern Iraq. And to give you an idea, it's bigger than the state of Massachusetts. So That's where we would travel to different base camps, do contracts with different locals, give people money to be able to make it happen. We wouldn't hand the money over. We'd do the contracts and then take them with us to get the money. So,
and are contractors local?
Yes,
military or local civilians, or are they American civilians?
Good question. Yeah, no, there was no. We couldn't get supplies quick enough back then, so they were all Iraqi nationals.
Okay,
was able to develop some friendships even with some guys that I stayed in contact with for a few years afterward, but have lost contact since.
Yeah.
Of some people we used to deal with. It wasn't a fun time. It was an interesting time. The biggest threat to us at that point became IEDs. I remember at one point myself and Captain Posey would do rocks, paper, scissors as he would lead the convoy to go get supplies, because it was about a 5-hour trip where we would have to go through Iraqi towns. And at one point it was like 25% of the convoys were getting hit with IEDs. And a lot of people didn't want to go at the time. They were scared. And I was just like, I'm not scared, but I started thinking about it, and I do a convoy like every other day. And 25% of these guys were getting it right behind me, right in front of me. I was like, it's bound to happen eventually. At one point it almost happened, but we got a device that blocked any cell phone signals. And we had the IED blow up about 250 yards behind us once we were past it, which was awesome to see. Thank goodness, because I was trying to make that thing go off right where we were. So we were very fortunate in that respect, that we didn't take any IEDs, but we did have people in other convoys get hit that we weren't on. I remember we had the 1st Infantry Division replace us at the very end of 13 months, and they went through the Iraqi town right in the middle of the day, which is like a no-no. Told them that too, I believe, through the command and stuff like that. But they went through that convoy on the way in before they even got to the base camp to replace us. They got hit, and they had a few guys die, and they were all just like flustered coming into our base camp initially, and it doesn't always come down to the last, the time frame where you went. But, I just remember I was like, welcome to Iraq for them.
Wow.
We were fortunate not to get into any, but we usually took off 5 a.m. before the sun would rise, and we would get through the dangerous towns at like the ideal time. So we plan around that. So it all comes down to Ezra Tales sometimes. You just try to do what you can do. Really, you can't control everything, so you control what you can control.
Yeah.
And
so you're on these, I think I counted 2 or 3 or 4 3-month extensions on being tip of the tip.
Yeah.
Where did you go from there?
So if I could describe it as we went through Baghdad, we went completely north, almost to the Kurdish areas, Kurdistan, which they call it. I don't remember exactly how many miles, but it's basically from South Iraq to North Iraq.
Okay.
And we took off from North Iraq down southeast to where KMTB is, right near Iran.
Okay.
So on that side, we could see Iran observation posts from where we were, and we would watch their observation posts. So that's about, I think the distance was like around 760 kilometers that we went total.
Okay.
I think it was the longest convoy on record, period.
Wow.
Mechanized convoy, longest one. And, and that like short time frame was like a continuous of stop and go for 760 kilometers or so.
Once you finished that part, like, were you done?
So we finished that part, if I can recall, probably in about 6 months. And then we had an additional 6.5 months after that.
Of doing the same thing or different orders?
No, because the first probably, I would say around 5 to 6 months was really just doing the convoy, pushing, developing permanent areas where we're going to establish ourselves in the eastern Iraq, in Kirkuk. And the last 6 months was building up the new Iraqi army, the very first battalion. So we set up governments in local towns, and that's what operations did. And we were assigned to just build up with supplies, logistics, and training of the Iraqi army battalion to help defend themselves.
Okay.
The idea was to empower them so we didn't have to always do the work, and they could hopefully take over eventually.
Wow. How long were you over there in its entirety?
I had another deployment, but it wasn't the same. But I'd spent probably maybe 2 months longer, total like 14, 15 months.
Okay. And did you come back to the States and then redeploy back over?
No, I didn't. I actually, by that time, I had less than a year left for my commitment, and I had a choice to make. Do I stay in or get out? It was pretty high up tempo since I had joined, even an officer basic course, going to Ranger School, and I never saw myself staying in the Army, but I was always wanting to do my absolute best while I was in there, and so I think I had peace with what I had done. I think I was able to do things that no one else would do. Just remember, we could tell if we were the very first people in an Iraqi town if we threw these charms and these MREs. We had these little candies we would throw out to kids, and if they ran, we realized we were the first Americans there. But if the kids ran to it, we realized there had been some Americans there, and that was like our litmus test as we went through. But just being able to do that, being able to set up quick reaction forces and raids and stuff like that, I think I had my fair share of more than I ever thought I had, was going to do. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to see what the civilian world was like, because I left for West Point, New York, when I was 18 years old, and I was 26, almost 27 at the time. I just said, well, what's the rest of the world like now?
Right. Which is certainly a reasonable question for one with those accomplishments to ask. Do I remember, and there's a chance that my creative side might have embellished this memory, but do I remember at a BNI you talked about a specific raid or a key raid that you were involved in?
I would be surprised if I shared. I will share with you a little key raid that I was involved in, but
it was kind of a big deal.
I don't know if I would
it?
have shared that at that kind of. Yeah, maybe. I don't think I would have shared that though at that kind of.
Okay, I wonder if it was I wonder if you dropped pardon the pun, a hint bomb during a one-on-one or something. But the one I'm remembering was kind of a big deal.
So, okay, I can tell you for me it was a big deal, and later on there was a bunch of raids, so it wasn't. But up to the time, because we were one of the first forces, we were probably 3.5 months, maybe give or take, into our push through Iraq. And we started settling down in an area a little bit, and we realized that people would come to our checkpoints either shot dead, barely breathing, hurt, maimed. So what was happening is there was a lot of lawlessness going around. And you could imagine the same thing would happen when there's a disaster in the U.S. People take advantage of that, how much more in another country. Right. So people are stealing other people's goods, hurting their families, taking revenge. So we're dealing with dead bodies at our checkpoints. Not like every day, but I definitely remember a few trucks just piled up with bodies that came through. I remember a talk with our commander, and I was like, I don't really want to start these raids or being the police force. And our commander said it's our moral obligation to do it. And I was like, crap. I was like, because I know who's going to be leading it.
Yeah.
Right? And I better, you know what I mean? I'm the only ranger around. So I'm like, okay, I'm the only one equipped to really be able to put together a QRF and, establish, really train up some guys that didn't have my training, or even infantry guys, because we're artillery. We were supposed to shoot bombs. We used to joke around, everybody becomes infantry in a war. We would used to say that when it was peacetime, but no one realized it really happened. And when it really happened, people were so pissed because they're like, I'm not trained to do this. I'm not trained to do this. And so I ended up finding 10 guys who were ready to go and just do it. Said, hey, it is our moral obligation, and I didn't want to have anybody that was scared. So I just took 10 guys that I knew I could command and control well, that I knew had initiative, courage and stuff like that. And I trained them up. We did just really quick rehearsals. I had trained them earlier since I was a part of that unit for a while. So some of them had some good training. It was made up of a good group of guys, and they were teachable, coachable. And so we ended up becoming that police force. So when people started getting shot or maimed or stolen from, we knew it was our time to go. So we waited, and I think there was some people shot at one of our checkpoints, came in, we knew it was happening. Now we're active. I said, we're good to go. And I remember it's like, okay, and where are these guys? Well, they're located, so far down this road over here near this town. And I was like, okay, well, here goes nothing, And so we got in our Humvees that are just basically with vinyl around them. We don't have up armored Humvees that are bulletproof. So I say I'll lead the convoy, and I say everybody's lights are off. Just look at our glow in the dark things behind us. And so we're going to go completely tactical, which is not good for other people that aren't trained. But I was in the driver's seat on the radio, and I had my night vision on, and I was on two different radios. One was on a brigade net with the helicopters who were had eyes on the perpetrators or terrorists or whatever you want to call them. Right when we started traveling down the road, lights out. I just remember I had not felt alive more than I did right then. I mean, my senses were probably more aware than I had ever seen them. And I remember I was caught, I had cotton mouth. I was so dry, I could barely speak. My tongue would stick to the roof of my mouth. And I was having to speak on the radios to the people in the helicopters. And they were giving us instructions on where they were as we were probably going 55 miles down a road with just night vision goggles, completely blackout. I was like, okay, my goal was to have our guys not kill each other, because one of the biggest things on an untrained unit is shooting each other. Mm-hmm. Even in a trained unit, because bullets fly. Fratricide is very common, because you just don't want to walk up. You have to at least suppress fire and be able to flank an enemy. So we went down, and I just remember talking to the helicopter. We got to the area, and they were walking us through. They were saying like 1,000 yards from them, 800 yards, and 600 yards, and I'd say we'd stop like 500 yards. And the only way that we could actually stay on track, because these guys were actually on the road and somewhere in the ditch on the side of the road, is I had to put myself in the middle of the road to command and control A team and B team to my left and right. Mm. And I was like, crap, I'm like right down the road. We get shot. Mm. So that was a little surreal moment for me, but I won't get into details, but everything worked out to our favor because we just got on them before they could even respond.
Yeah.
And they didn't know what happened. And we were able to make, I think, like 4 or 5 arrests. I probably could have been more aggressive, but I didn't. I didn't pursue anything in the ditches or towards the town, but we just found the guys that the pilot saw in the air. It was amazing that we didn't get hurt, that we got on them, and we were able to make those arrests. And I remember on the way back, you could hear the pilots on the radio saying it was like, they're like, it's amazing. It's just like Black Hawk Down. We've never seen anything like it. Get right on them and take them down. It's like they were just doing this all in the entire brigade net. And the brigade net, to give you an idea, between like a company and a brigade, there's 5 companies in a battalion and probably 3 or more battalions in a brigade.
Okay.
So that gives you the amount of people and exposure that we had. And after I came back, everybody was just like hearing that, because it was like live feed of information that nobody had ever had before on the battle, as they were feeding it with the pilots. And it just so happened they were on that brigade net because it was a big deal at that time, because it was the only reaction force in that area. And after that, there was a lot of people that wanted to be a part of that quick reaction force. So that was pretty cool.
Well done.
It went on for another 3.5, 4 months, and I had, it was getting pretty wearing by then.
Wow.
So, every night basically something was happening. So I had to deal with that. But yeah, at least it started right, able to get some good guys and positive mindset towards it. Definitely able to pull off a successful raid, really take people down that were just, I would say, stealing and, potentially murdering some civilians coming across, trying to take advantage of the chaos of the time.
Right. The story that I'm still trying to dredge my memory to see if I'm remembering it correctly. Was there someone's palace that you were one of the first people to enter?
Okay,
is my memory embellishing that, or do I recall you saying
not
it?
A palace. No, not a palace. So we didn't get a palace, but we were definitely
Or a hideout or some like
okay. So we
major
were
figurehead.
I can't remember. It was either Tikrit or Taji. Tikrit's Saddam's hometown, and we were pushing up, and we took over an airport right near it.
Okay.
And I remember pulling up to it and realizing that we occupied an area and nobody had really done a really thorough search of it. So I decided to go and recon what we were actually occupying, which was in the middle of our thing. And we found tons of bunkers and stuff like that. I was able to find like a lot of weapons, Russian weapons mostly, a lot of weapons in the bunker bleeding out, just sitting there. I remember just going in one of those bunkers thinking to be booby trapped and just realized, thank goodness they weren't. That was a cool thing, realizing that was the first person, unlocking this thing, opening it up, at least since it was abandoned by whoever had control of that airport before.
Yeah.
And seeing a lot of just the munitions and stuff like that. Can't read Russian, couldn't tell exactly what they were, but definitely had been in the Baghdad Palace, but we weren't the first there. I was not the first in Tikrit because we took over the airport, and that was the mission there. But I had the palaces, just not the first person. I had remembered that we had reports from some soldiers that got into the Baghdad Palace and they were first. And I remember we were so pissed because we were in combat operations and the guys that said like they were service support at that time had just sat down in the palace and they said all the ponds and lakes were stocked with fish and they were fishing and catching fish and there were like these exotic deer running around and so they shot some of those deer and were eating those deer. For fresh meat because we hadn't had any 5 months, I think, in our unit, 4.5, 5 months. So.
The Baghdad Palace, is this like the palace? Is this Saddam's palace?
Yes. Yeah, it's the palace made of marble. Everything was made of marble. By the time I got there, there was a lot of soldiers over there.
Yeah.
I wasn't the first, but I did get to stay there and it was pretty neat. But I just remember the stories of people when the first people that were on some of those palaces talking about just like all this wild game that you would expect if you went on a paid guided hunt, somewhere with somebody, a bunch of money. That's what it sounded like, like a little haven in the middle of just horribleness, a haven where somebody would be accumulating all the great stuff for themselves, and not available or not even offering that to, anybody at the expense of the people, right?
Let's take a quick break for a nonprofit spotlight selected by our guest.
You're not going to believe what you're about to see. Victor Marks is here.
I've never seen anybody with faster hands than Victor Marks.
I'm noticing a pattern. Some of the people that you most don't want to mess with have a lot of respect for you.
And I'm going to pull up the clip just for intimidation factor.
One of a kind, wonderful man. He's just absolutely amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Victor Marks.
Rob looks up and startled, and he sees Victor Marks.
You've come over some very big obstacles in your life.
I had a stepfather who held a gun to my head when I was about 7 years old. And he went to hit me. I saw the Lord appear in between me and him.
Nobody gets out of this world scot-free. Trauma and tragedy, misfortunes, it happens to everybody. My question to you is, what do you do with your life? What do you turn to?
Man, so you come back home to the States. What is that re-entry decompression like?
That's a great question. I remember it was sad for me, and I know a lot about sad stories, but I remember coming back, and because we didn't know exactly the date that we would fly out, I didn't know until within 12 hours of me flying out of country of Iraq. So nobody was actually able to plan accordingly and get plane tickets, be there when I got back. So I had a few friends in the town, really good friends in the town, but either they were all deployed by the time I got back or one got out of the Army, got there back earlier and left with his family. And so I got back, and then we went through our ceremony of us getting back. So I fly back, and we're, doing the welcome party home and everything. And everybody's like, and now you can, see your family. And I just remember everybody went to a family member. And I was like, yeah, I was so excited to be back. I didn't care, but I remember just everybody, had a family member, went there. And I looked around, I was like, crap, like my family's coming, but they're not going to be here for like a week because, they had to get plane tickets and stuff. So they don't live anywhere near Oklahoma. So I just remember I got my pack and I just started walking, and I'm like, I'm going to go find a hotel.
Wow.
And I remember it was like the loneliest walk ever.
You think?
Yeah. The loneliest walk ever. Because, I didn't want to be a part of like a lot of people with like their reunions, this and that. And it wasn't a long walk. I did have a car, but we couldn't get to our cars until like a day later or 2 days later because, otherwise people couldn't see their families. Other people would have to be on assignment, etc. So
right.
I just remember we couldn't quite get there for some reason to the motor pool where our cars were stored. And so I just remember walking and just walking into town, getting a hotel.
And just so like sitting under the shower for hours and hours on end.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, man, I'm feeling sorry for myself. I'm like, that's weird, but I'm so excited to be back. And once I had people that I was able to see and things, family members visited, this and that, it was fine. And I kind of went on a high, I would say, for like a month and a half, 2 months of just being back. One of the very first things I remember, though, and it was really hard, I never got over it for probably a couple of years, is just I remember I went to a Chili's, and people were just eating and drinking and having a merry time and just stuffing their face with buffalo wings and sandwiches and chips and salt. And I just remember sitting there watching those people. And I was by myself at the time because I had to eat. And I was just like, these people have no clue. I said, they don't even understand life. That's what, and I wasn't angry, but I was like, they just don't get it.
They just don't get it. Yeah.
And my mindset changed later that I enjoyed when people enjoyed it because I was like, I'm so happy they're having fun. But the same lines, it's like this whole world moved on. The whole town changed. My friends don't live there anymore. A year's gone by. I felt like I actually knew Iraq more than I knew Oklahoma. Mm. And I remember in Iraq, the spring went by, the summer went by, the winter went by, and all of a sudden the spring went by again. Because we were over there for so long. And I was like, I've been a resident here for over a year. And I remember when I went home, it took me a while to really feel like I belong in the U.S. and not in Iraq.
Wow.
And
after all that, sheesh.
It did bother me a little bit. And maybe I'm not saying from a moral perspective, but I definitely couldn't watch immoral fun on TV. Anything that wasn't really, I would say, productive for a person. I just remember watching some kind of like
Jackass, the show Jackass, or
something like that. They just don't get it. That's what I'm just like, people have no clue. And it's hard, I think, for soldiers that are deployed. And I know the deployments aren't that long anymore, but there's still issues. But soldiers that just deploy for a long time, and you come back and you realize that the world moves on regardless of how bad your life is, or regardless if a friend is gone. They just move on.
Or multiple friends. Yeah.
I think the biggest disturbance for me was that we were over there sacrificing over a year of our life, sacrificing the next 2 years of social life because we had to restart everything.
Yeah.
No relationships. I had a relationship before I left. No relationship once I got there. And just all the different things. You just have to reintegrate yourself in society. And I think that is a hard part for somebody who has sacrificed a lot and has been over there.
Yeah.
And while I never classified myself as any kind of PTSD, like it is hard to reintegrate for a while. It was hard for me to relate to a normal civilian, especially if they didn't have any respect for what we did. And especially if they had more of a pity party towards what, like I remember telling somebody like, yeah, I'm in the Army or I served over, I'm so sorry. It's like, what? You're like, I'm a victim? Oh,
man.
That's the most insulting thing I've ever heard.
Wow.
I was forced to go there. No, we're in a volunteer army. No, we're not all broken.
Right.
And when you get out of that stuff and you live through that and, you're able to grow through that, I'm like, you are different for sure, but you are yourself 4.0.
Yeah.
You're not
yeah.
yourself.
Hopefully you're better.
You're better. And I know we hear a lot about PTSD, but I like to tell people that, you know what, not every soldier is broken. You know, some of the absolute best talent and the best people come out of the Army, come out of the services.
Yeah.
And
I know several.
With me, like I said, the work ethic never bothered me. What was possible was always what I just wanted to know what's possible to achieve. And that's what I saw in Advocare, that you can achieve, like, you know, whatever the people think is impossible.
Yeah.
That was an attraction. But I just remember just seeing a lot of other people who just have simple lives, go to a job, 9 to 5, go home, watch some TV, get up, go to a job, 9 to 5, go home. I was like, dude, that's like hell in my opinion. That's like a definition of hell.
Sure.
It's like Groundhog Day, you know?
Sure.
I mean,
oh my God, I hate that movie.
You know, and challenges are what I live for still. You know, I'm an achiever. I think that's a defining personality trait for me. I did a strength finders test, but
yeah. Oh, well,
you know,
and it's an obvious one too. I should just tell you that from the outset. I would have guessed that if you had been like, "Hey, I'm going to take strength finders, achiever." Just go ahead and count that as one of your 5.
Well, I think, you know, not everybody that comes out of West Point or serves, though. I think they're achievers too. But I've seen a lot of people play it safe, and I'm not a safe player. I'm a risk taker.
Yep.
I want what's possible, like I said, not what's guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
And you can speak, since you were my photographer for my wedding. I think I wanted what was possible when I went and started courting my wife to be.
Yeah. One of my favorite couples to have photographed.
I don't know. I think for me, at least, that's what it's about. And so for the service time, it made me way stronger. I am less tolerant probably because of what I went through when I see people who don't try.
Sure.
And are unhappy in life, yet they do the same things and don't try. It's probably one of the biggest things that drive me nuts. It's hard for me to watch somebody who says, yeah, I want this, I want that. And, well, I'm not willing to do anything.
Yeah,
every day of my life.
Show me you want it with your action.
Yeah, and it just drives me nuts in that respect. So I do see a lot of people from the service have better work ethics. They're not afraid to work or get in, the grind. Mm-hmm. Even in it doesn't have to be like a special combat unit or any combat unit. It could be service support. Just people with discipline I've seen, coming out of the service. They have a lot of qualities that civilians don't have.
That's true.
And they're not all broken guys. They're up and rising champions. One of my classmates I played football with, his name's Hunter Hill. He's running for governor, so over in Georgia. So I think he's going to win. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I've got handful of veterans in my world, and from what I can tell, they're not broken. They're beyond broken, or if they have been broken, they've healed stronger.
Yeah.
Like a bone does. If you break your arm where the fracture was, it's stronger. They're that.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that they don't have flashbacks or bad memories or whatever, but they're winners. They're achievers. I have mad respect for military. My dad is military. My dad was actually at Fort Sill for a little while back in, he did a tour in Vietnam. He was there for 1 year. He also lives 2.5 miles down the road, so he made it back. Actually, if I would not be here had he not made it back. One could call me a flag-waving person because I have one on my house. I fly it because I respect it, and I respect the people that gave their lives for it.
Yeah.
I don't want to say I'm a military brat because I didn't. That's a term of endearment if you've traveled around the world from base to base. That wasn't me. My dad was a civilian until he re-enlisted in the National Guard and then retired National Guard. But I don't consider myself a military brat, but if I don't get it, I want to get it.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? I don't have the direct experience for being in that kind of training, and quite honestly, I would probably not get past the first week of basic training, whether now or even when I was 18 or 20 years old. But it's one of those things, just like I had just deep admiration for soldiers and veterans and everything that it all stands for. So when you said, well, that person said, well, I am a military, and you're like, well, I'm sorry. Like, how did you just not deck that person? Because I might have if I'd have been your wingman right there. I'm like, seriously?
They were female, first of all.
Oh, well, okay. There's a pass. That is an automatic pass.
Very sad to see. They don't really get it. So I hope that perception's not really all there is, because there's, our military does breed some of the finest people, like you said, and there's some great people who never served as well. But hand in hand, if I'm looking to recruit in my business or any other things, if people have military service and it's reputable what they did, they're already going to be up there. And it's not just because I served,
right?
But know that they had to overcome things and they have to learn things that aren't given to them.
Yes.
They have to learn, grab something, figure it out, learn, accomplish it, and then find the next task to overcome, versus somebody who's just been given and enabled in their whole entire lives. That's a very dangerous place to be.
Yep. So you're a father. Obviously you're married, because I saw it all. Had the distinct privilege of photographing you and your lovely bride. Engagement stuff, her bridal portrait, wedding day, whole nine. And then you moved to California, so I have not seen you in person in forever. So talk to me about like the family and fatherhood side of Markus now that you are years back into civilian world and reassimilated and kind of moved on to that next chapter.
First of all, I'd say, I have great respect, and I'm sure Megan does too, for anybody who's married and has to go through that deployment process. I don't know if I would have performed to the level I did had I not been single with ties back here, because there's so much more online as a parent. So I think that's, one thing I would like to say. But for me, being a dad, I always wanted to be a great dad. I think, and this is me mentally, not talking about actually being a dad yet, but our kids are our legacy. Having a lot of kids is like having a lot of arrows in your quiver.
Arrows in your quiver, yeah.
Right? And it alludes to that, talking about how much stronger a person is with kids. And, unfortunately, there's a perception out there that, kids aren't that important in certain circles. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we can forget just how important they are. And I don't think that often probably kids aren't important to parents' lives if they didn't really invest in the kids themselves. Kids can still, grow up and do good things. And I think, for me, just not really having a fully present dad all the time, I have to really test that to the grace of God and just becoming a Christian and giving my life to Christ at a young age and really saying, God, how do you want me to be? I had that lacking in my life. So that was very powerful. And if you know me, it's a very defining thing. I think that it's who I am, because I am not like my mom. I'm not like my brother, and I'm not like my dad. She goes, what in the world? Like you don't even belong in that family. You're just different, not better or anything. But, seeing that now from a parent's perspective and just how special it was to see Graham as my son, and he's 2 years old now.
Nice. Oh, it's about to really get fun, dude.
It's been so awesome to see that. And I remember the first part, it was like, he was born and I was like, I love him, but I know Megan was a little closer to him, breastfeeding him. And I felt like she was easily able to bond with him. And I can't remember, it was around 6 weeks. And I would always just, and every morning I'd always just sit him on the couch, and he would sit there. He would look at me, and I'd wrap him up, and he would always try to talk to me. And his eyebrows were going up, and I'd just talk to him like we were having a conversation, and he'd start just trying to do that back, and I do that every morning. And I just remember just one morning waking up and doing that, and just like almost in a scared way, like, I love you so much.
Yeah.
That it's scary.
Oh, it's very scary.
You're vulnerable, and I know a lot of people don't love because of that. Man, I mean, it just really hit me, and just how much I loved, my son. I think that was a really cool, moment for me to realize that, and it didn't happen at birth. I loved him.
Yeah.
I can't explain it, but I kind of felt like, oh my gosh, he's a part of me now, and now I can't remember what it was like not having kids.
Yep. So
a thing that drives me is I look at him, and he's going to have to overcome challenges that I never had to as far as society. Mm-hmm. And it's weird. I'm going to tell you a couple things dear to my heart, and I'm not being political here, but, I'm half Hispanic. My name's Garza. My dad's full Mexican. He speaks fluent Spanish, and that's probably his first language. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. All right. My wife's Italian. Graham is white looking. All right. He has blondish hair, and he has ocean blue eyes. the most crystal clear blue eyes. I will not go throughout a day in public where people don't comment on his eyes. I cannot tell you how many times people comment on their eyes and they look at me or Megan and they say, where does he get that from?
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing. Like, where do you get those blue eyes?
Megan doesn't have blue eyes, but he looks exactly like me. That's what people say. But I do have light eyes and I do have greenish eyes. But Megan has pure brown. She has a little green in, but mostly hazel, but brown.
Yeah.
I don't know where that happened, but and I look at like all the stuff about a white man today. I'm Mexican, and I'm like, man, if a kid has blonde hair and blue eyes, is he going to have a strike against him growing up today? And I don't want to get political, but man, that's a scary thing. So if you want to know what side I'm on, technically I am a minority, but I'm for equal treatment no matter what your skin color is, or your character, which means you don't get advantages or disadvantages for being any kind of race.
One way or another, yeah.
Exactly. So I am, it's funny, where did that come from? Well, my grandpa is Spanish and he had light eyes. So I know that. Like I said, I have light eyes, but my brother, dark hair, dark eyes. So it's funny just having him, and I say, well, he looks like me and he looks like Megan too. But I said, the blue eyes are from God. So he's God's child too.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm excited. And I realized that, what, not just telling kids, you can do anything you can do whatever you choose to be, or do whatever you want to do. And it's like parents tell that, but do they live it themselves?
Yeah.
I just look at my life and I'm thinking, man, he is going to see everything I do. And if I get comfortable with anything I've accomplished, he's not going to know any of that. Yeah, sure. He, grab an old drawer one day and say, wow, look what my dad did. But he's going to only know dad from when he was alive.
Right.
He grows up. So, I got to figure out how I can become better. Not just as, as a dad, because I'd be present with him and I am. I'm spending so much time with him. Thank the Lord that I got out of corporate America and built a business in Advocare that afforded me the opportunity to gain time because I can be that dad for him. And I want to be the biggest voice in his life. There's no way I'm going to let somebody else spend that time with him.
Right.
Or so, you know what I'm saying? So I'm there to influence him and be that voice. And that was the reasons I did it. And I'm just so grateful for the foresight to be able to say that's what I wanted to do. But, I want to become great so he believes he can become great. Because I believe that I could do great things because I saw my mom go from nothing to, a very successful lady and did it with 2 kids and a bad marriage.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. It's impressive without those circumstances. It's even more impressive inside those circumstances.
Yeah.
So give her a high five from the guy she probably doesn't remember at the wedding.
Oh, sure. And so, I have a great example. I look at my life and I'm like, okay, I got to become great. And we're becoming great in what we do. We're making a huge difference and impact for people in our Advocare business. It's a position of influence. And when you have a sales team of hundreds of people or even a dozen people and, you just try to make your biggest impact with those people, we're doing it, but I also want him to see dad healthy, buff like dad was when he played college football, so I don't want to sit there and just be, I want him to believe like, hey, that's my dad. I can become great too. And if he doesn't see me becoming great, not just of what I had done and then do nothing, no, always get better and better. Continue to get better and better. And people sometimes don't get it. I always ask, they say, why aren't you happy where you are? Why don't you just want to sit there and just, and I'm like, why? Because I want to be, used with my potential. My potential wasn't just existing so I could just go and serve myself. A great question is, if you had all the money in the world and time to do with it, what would you do? Most people probably want to do good, I'm guessing.
Yeah, God, I would hope so.
I hope they would. But, money will just make someone more of what they already are.
Yep.
So it's not about money. It is about freedom. It is about influence. It is about being the biggest voice in my family's life, in my kids' life, in my friends' life if I can. It's about having a big, a stage to where I can give glory where glory is supposed to be given.
Sure.
And that's what drives me every day. And I'm not happy and I'm not content. And I even have other stuff going on outside of Advocare now. And our Advocare business is booming, going better than ever had before. And I'm still super active with that. But I'm like, I'm going to push myself. And what else can I do outside of Advocare? And so I'm trying to help my mom expand her clinic, and we're buying commercial real estate right now.
Yeah.
So there's a challenge ahead, right? Yeah. It's a challenge I want to learn about, because I also want investments, not just a business that pays me.
Right.
I kind of look at the Robert Kiyosaki thing of the quadrants,
Mm-hmm.
But he talks about, whether you're an employee, self-employed person, maybe like a doctor or veterinarian like my mom is, a business owner or someone who owns a business, they can walk away and it still grows and pays them. And an investment, it's an I, where you can get into big investments that pay you large, but it's very risky. And I believe in that. And I got a business, but I don't have an investment. And if I could learn how to be a better steward of money,
sure,
which is an easy word to say, but a steward of money is able to direct money to where it can grow and not just sit there, and then use those resources to do good.
Yes.
And that's my goal.
Sure.
And people are like, have you ever developed real estate before? No, but I got a book and I read it and I'm
right.
in contract. You know what I mean? I got the loan.
Yeah.
Already approved.
I've got a brain and I can read, so I can learn.
I think one of the most depressing things is if you just, you go to high school and you quit learning, or you go to college and you quit learning. I think even West Pointers, they get West Point degrees, they stop learning. They don't stop learning maybe, but, they don't take the initiative. They're waiting for other people to tell them what to do.
They stop studying.
Yeah. I guess a defining characteristic, I just had to realize that I'm a risk taker and I am a visionary.
Yeah.
And futuristic is my key on Strength Finders. I'm very futuristic thinking. And I like those, I thought they were boring when I heard that. I was like, so what? My wife's like, that's awesome. Why don't you? I'm like, it's boring. I knew that already. You could probably see why some people don't like to hang out too much sometimes, or they might feel like they're falling behind. But if someone's just ready to kind of kick their boots up, retire, and wait to die, then I can't relate.
Right. I agree. Well, this has been awesome, brother. Appreciate you taking the time tonight. I know it's prime time. You've probably missed Graham's bedtime by now, but this was good.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm honored that you asked. So I
appreciate you being willing to tell it.
Yeah. Anyway, so I really am. I'm honored, man, and I hope it helps. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about where this goes and the other people you talk about, or talk to and interview and stuff like that.
That's cool.
So that's gonna be.
Well, thank you very much. I want you to be honored, also because I have my immense respect for the military and the sacrifices and the skills and all that stuff. So I appreciate you saying that and for chatting tonight.
Yeah, absolutely.
There you have it. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe and share with your friends. Go to Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or wherever you get your podcasts. Search for Collected Clan and subscribe. See more in the show notes for this episode at www.collectedclan.com/Markus Garza. Markus is spelled with a K, Markus. And a big shout out to my friends Worldwide Groove Corporation for this episode's original music. The song is Mimosa from their album Chilladesiac Lounge Volume 1. Check out more of their music at worldwidegroovecorporation.com. Now go be you.